My name is Grace, I'm 32 years old, and I'm standing in the grand lobby of the Waldorf Astoria, sipping champagne while watching my parents and sister frantically argue with the doorman in the pouring rain. They're soaking wet, mascara running, designer clothes ruined, desperately trying to get into my company's exclusive gala. The best part? I orchestrated this entire scene after years of their abuse. Before I tell you how we got here, where are you watching from today? If you've ever had to deal with toxic family members who treated you like their personal ATM while showing zero respect, hit that like button and subscribe because this story of sweet revenge will show you that sometimes the best response to family betrayal is to simply let them face the consequences of their own actions, and trust me, watching them get their karma in real time was worth every second of planning. 6 months before that glorious night at the Waldorf, I was sitting in my corner office as vice president of marketing at one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, feeling proud of everything I'd accomplished at 32. My phone buzzed with yet another text from my mother Diane asking when I'd be coming to Sunday dinner because my younger sister Lily had some exciting news to share. I should have known then that exciting news in my family always meant one thing. They needed my money again. You see, Lily was 29 years old and had never held a job for more than 3 months in her entire life. While I was pulling all-nighters in college, working 2 jobs to pay my tuition, she was at home being babied by our parents Robert and Diane, who insisted she was too delicate and creative to be burdened with something as mundane as employment. They'd tell anyone who would listen that Lily was an artist, a free spirit who couldn't be confined by traditional career paths, while I was just their practical daughter, the one built for corporate life and making money. That Sunday dinner started like every other family gathering, with my parents fawning over Lily while barely acknowledging my presence beyond asking about my latest bonus. I sat there listening to them praise Lily's new hair color for 20 minutes before she finally announced her big news: she wanted to start a boutique fashion line. My parents' eyes lit up like Christmas morning as they immediately started planning how to make their golden child's dreams come true. Then my father turned to me with that familiar look that made my stomach drop and said those 8 words I'd heard too many times before: "Grace, we need to discuss your financial contribution." That's when I learned the truth that would change everything. My parents had been managing what they called a family investment account since I graduated college, where I'd been depositing money monthly thinking it was for their retirement. Turns out, they'd been funneling every penny straight to Lily for her endless parade of failed business ventures. The organic soap company that lasted 2 months, the food truck that never got permits, the life coaching certification she never completed, the photography studio that took one wedding photo before she got bored. $45,000 of my hard-earned money had been financing my sister's hobby of playing entrepreneur while my parents enabled every whim. When I confronted them right there at the dinner table, asking how they could steal from me for years, my mother's response was to laugh and say I was being dramatic. "It's not stealing when it's family, Grace. Besides, you make more than enough money. Lily needs our support to find her path." My father nodded along, adding that I should be grateful they raised me to be successful enough to help my sister. Lily just smirked from across the table, twirling her hair like she always did when she knew she was untouchable, protected by our parents' delusions. The real slap in the face came 3 weeks later during my promotion celebration. I'd just been offered senior VP, the youngest person in company history to reach that level, and I'd stupidly invited my family to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. Halfway through dinner, Lily showed up an hour late, stumbling drunk, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's rent. She knocked over a full glass of red wine onto my white suit, then laughed hysterically while slurring that at least now I looked less boring. When the manager asked if we needed assistance, my parents actually defended her, saying she was just celebrating her sister's success in her own way. My boyfriend Nathan watched in horror as my parents spent the rest of the dinner comforting Lily, who was fake crying about how hard it was to be the creative one in a family of corporate robots. They never once asked if I was okay, never congratulated me on the promotion, never even offered to pay for dry cleaning. Instead, my mother pulled me aside as we were leaving and lectured me about being more understanding of Lily's struggles. "Not everyone can be like you, Grace. Some people need more support to find their way. You should be helping your sister, not judging her. That night, Nathan held me while I cried angry tears, not because of the ruined suit or the destroyed celebration, but because I finally understood that in my parents' eyes, I would never be anything more than a bank account with legs. No matter how much I achieved, how hard I worked, or how much I gave, it would never be enough because I wasn't Lily. I was just the responsible daughter who existed to fund the real favorite child's dreams, and they couldn't even pretend to care about mine. 4 months before the gala, Nathan and I decided to take our relationship to the next level. He'd been planning the proposal for months, wanting it to be perfect, but I'd insisted that having my family there would mean everything to me. God, how naive I was to still hope they could share in my happiness just once. Nathan organized a beautiful garden party at his parents' estate, inviting both our families and closest friends for what everyone thought was just a summer barbecue. The moment was magical. Nathan got down on one knee under the rose arbor his mother had been growing for 20 years, the sunset painting everything in gold, our loved ones gasping with joy as he asked me to be his wife. I said yes through happy tears, and for exactly 30 seconds, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Then I heard Lily's voice cutting through the applause like nails on chalkboard. Of course Grace would steal my thunder again. Everything always has to be about perfect Grace and her perfect life. I turned to see my sister standing there in a designer sundress I recognized from the receipts I'd found, her face twisted with rage. My parents immediately rushed to her side, my mother cooing that she understood how hard this must be for her. My father actually had the audacity to suggest that Nathan and I should keep our engagement quiet for a while, just until Lily found someone too. It's only fair, he said, as if my engagement was something that needed to be hidden to protect my sister's ego. Nathan's jaw dropped as he stood up, still holding my hand. Are you seriously asking us to hide our engagement because Lily is single? His mother Victoria stepped forward, putting a protective arm around me, but my parents just doubled down. My mother launched into a speech about how Lily had always dreamed of getting married first, how she was more romantic and deserved to have that milestone before her older sister who was too focused on career anyway. The other guests stood frozen, watching this insanity unfold at what should have been a celebration. That's when Lily completely lost it. She screamed that I'd been planning this to humiliate her, that I knew she'd been talking to someone online who might propose soon, which was the first any of us had heard about this imaginary boyfriend. When I laughed, not meanly but just out of shock at the absurdity, she charged at me. I didn't even have time to step back before she shoved me with both hands, sending me flying backward into the glass patio table. The sound of shattering glass mixed with screams from the guests as I hit the ground hard, feeling immediate sharp pain in my right arm. Blood started pooling on the white stones of the patio as everyone rushed toward me except for 3 people, my parents and Lily. Instead of helping, my parents were comforting Lily, who was now playing victim, claiming I'd provoked her with my smugness. Even as Nathan's father, a doctor, was examining my arm and saying I needed immediate medical attention, I heard my mother laugh and say, "Sisters will be sisters. They've been fighting like this since they were little." Nathan completely lost it then, pulling out his phone to call the police while his mother pressed clean towels to my bleeding arm. Your daughter just committed assault. She could have killed Grace. My parents finally seemed to realize the severity when they heard the word police, but instead of apologizing or checking on me, they went into defense mode. My father stepped between Nathan and me, saying we were overreacting and that calling the police on family was unforgivable. My mother added that I'd clearly provoked Lily by flaunting my engagement when I knew she was sensitive about being single. The EMTs arrived before the police, and the look of disgust on their faces when they heard my parents' excuses while loading me into the ambulance said everything. 12 stitches. That's what it took to close the gash in my arm from Lily's push. Nathan stayed with me the entire time, holding my good hand while I got stitched up, but my phone stayed silent. Not one text from my parents asking if I was okay. Instead, I watched Lily's Instagram story from the hospital bed, where she'd posted selfies from the party with captions about how some people couldn't handle her honesty and how family dynamics were so complicated when you're the truth teller. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages from extended family. My parents had spent the night calling everyone, spinning a tale about how I'd been bridezilla, lording my engagement over poor single Lily, and how she'd just given me a little push after I'd been cruel to her. They conveniently left out the 12 stitches, the blood, the fact that I could have been seriously injured. My Aunt Carol actually texted me saying I should apologize to Lily for making her feel bad about herself. Only my cousin Emma believed my side, and that's because she'd been smart enough to record the whole thing on her phone, including my parents laughing while I bled. Nathan's parents were horrified by my family's behavior and officially uninvited them from any wedding planning events. His mother Victoria, a successful lawyer herself, sat me down and gently suggested I might want to reconsider having my family at the wedding at all. "Sweetheart," she said, holding my bandaged hand, "family isn't supposed to hurt you and then laugh about it. What your sister did was assault, and what your parents did was enable abuse." But I still wasn't ready to accept that truth. I kept hoping that once the shock wore off, my parents would realize how wrong they'd been and apologize. I was still waiting for them to choose me, just once. 3 months before everything came crashing down, I was sitting in my home office, finally ready to take control of my finances and start planning my wedding properly. I'd decided to check my credit report to make sure everything was in order before Nathan and I applied for a mortgage together. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, all maxed out, all showing months of missed payments. $45,000 in debt that wasn't mine but had my name all over it. My hand shook as I called each credit card company, trying to understand how this happened. The addresses on the accounts were my parents' house. The purchases? Business equipment, inventory for an online boutique, Facebook ads for something called Lily's Luxe Life, thousands in what looked like vacation expenses, designer goods from Nordstrom and Saks. Every single charge connected back to my sister's latest business venture, the fashion line my parents had promised to help her start. Only they hadn't used their money or even the money they'd already stolen from me. They'd committed identity theft. I drove to my parents' house that night in a rage I'd never felt before. Nathan wanted to come with me, but I needed to face this myself. I had every credit card statement printed out, every fraudulent charge highlighted, ready to demand answers. When I burst through their door, I found them calmly having dinner with Lily, who was wearing what I now recognized as a $3,000 Balenciaga jacket that had been purchased with my stolen identity. The casual way they looked up at me, like I was interrupting their peaceful evening, made me even angrier. "How could you do this to me?" I threw the statements on their dinner table, watching the paper scatter across their plates. "You stole my identity. You destroyed my credit. This is fraud, actual federal crime fraud." My mother had the nerve to roll her eyes and say I was being dramatic again. She picked up one of the statements, glanced at it, and shrugged. "We needed your social security number because Lily couldn't get approved for business credit cards. Your credit was perfect, so we helped the process along. It's what families do, Grace. We help each other." My father jumped in with his usual manipulative tactics, standing up and using his height to try to intimidate me. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. Do you know how much that cost us? Consider this payback for everything we've done for you. You wouldn't even have that fancy job without the foundation we gave you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were actually trying to justify identity theft by saying I owed them for basic parenting. Lily finally spoke up, not to apologize but to complain that I was ruining dinner. She actually laughed, twirling her fork in her pasta like we were discussing the weather. "God, Grace, why are you so obsessed with money? It's just credit cards. Daddy said you make like $200,000 a year now. You can pay it off in no time. Meanwhile, I'm trying to build something meaningful here, but you wouldn't understand that because all you care about is your corporate ladder climbing. She pulled out her phone to show me her Instagram business page with a whopping 47 followers. Lily's Lux life is going to be huge. You should be thanking me for letting you invest in the ground floor. That's when Derek, Lily's new boyfriend who I'd met only once before, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My parents had apparently invited him to family dinner to celebrate their 6-week anniversary, because in their world, Lily having any boyfriend was more celebration-worthy than my engagement. What they didn't know was that Derek was recording everything on his phone, which he'd propped up against a water glass to catch what he thought would be a fun family dinner for his social media. Instead, he captured my parents admitting to fraud while my sister laughed about spending my boring money on her vacation to Cabo last month. I threatened to go to the police right then and there, pulling out my phone to show I was serious. That's when my parents switched from dismissive to emotional manipulation. My mother started crying, wailing about how could I threaten to put my own parents in jail. My father's face turned red as he accused me of being selfish, of only caring about money instead of family. "We gave you life," he shouted. "We sacrificed everything for you and your sister. And this is how you repay us? By threatening us with prison? You ungrateful little bitch." The words hung in the air as everyone froze. Even Lily stopped smirking for a second. I looked at these people who were supposed to love me, who were supposed to protect me, and saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't my family. They were parasites who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. Derek quietly excused himself to the bathroom, and I found out later he sent me the recording that night with a message saying he was sorry and that he was breaking up with Lily because he couldn't be with someone who treated their sister that way. The damage to my credit meant Nathan and I couldn't get approved for any wedding venues that required credit checks. We couldn't get the mortgage we'd planned. My credit score had dropped from 820 to 400 overnight. When I told Nathan's parents what happened, they immediately offered to help, but the shame I felt was overwhelming. Here I was, a successful executive who'd done everything right, and I couldn't even finance my own wedding because my family had stolen my identity. Victoria hugged me while I sobbed, promising they'd help me fight this, but the emotional damage was already done. 2 months before the gala, my grandmother Dorothy passed away peacefully in her sleep at 91 years old. She'd been the only family member who ever truly saw me, who celebrated my achievements and never made me feel like I was worth less than Lily. For the last 2 years of her life, I'd been her primary caregiver, visiting her every weekend, handling her medical appointments, making sure she was comfortable and happy. Lily visited maybe 3 times total, and only when she needed money, which grandmother always refused to give her. In her will, grandmother left her estate to be divided equally between Lily and me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was substantial enough to make a difference, about $200,000 each after the house was sold, plus some valuable jewelry and family heirlooms. She'd made me promise to use my portion for my wedding and starting my new life with Nathan, and I'd tearfully agreed, grateful that even in death she was looking out for me. My parents volunteered to act as executors of the estate, and stupidly, I agreed, thinking that even they wouldn't stoop so low as to steal from their dead mother. I threw myself into work and wedding planning, trusting my parents to handle the estate properly. The first sign something was wrong came when Lily suddenly showed up to Sunday dinner in a new Tesla, bragging about how she'd made some smart investments that paid off. When I asked what investments, she got cagey and changed the subject, but I noticed my parents exchanging nervous looks. A week later, she was posting pictures from a luxury spa in Switzerland, claiming she was there for business research for her fashion line that still hadn't produced a single piece of clothing. My suspicions grew when I called the estate lawyer to ask about the timeline for distributing the assets, only to be told that everything had already been distributed weeks ago. Both portions, he said, had been transferred to the accounts my parents had provided. When I told him I never received anything, he was confused, saying my parents assured him they were handling the transfer to both daughters. That's when I knew they'd done something unforgivable, even by their standards. I confronted them with my lawyer Michael, who Nathan's family had hired to help with the credit fraud situation. We showed up at their house unannounced on a Saturday morning, catching them off guard. When Michael explained that we were there about the missing inheritance, my mother's face went white. She stammered something about grandmother having second thoughts, claiming she'd verbally told them she wanted Lily to have everything because I was already successful. The lie was so obvious that even my father looked uncomfortable as she spun this tale. That's when Lily walked in from the kitchen, counting a stack of cash, and froze when she saw us. "What's the lawyer doing here?" she asked, shoving the money in her designer purse. When Michael asked her directly about the inheritance, she smirked and said, "Grandma always liked me better. She knew Grace didn't need the money, so she wanted me to have it." "Right, Mom?" The casual cruelty of stealing from our dead grandmother while lying about her final wishes made me physically sick. I demanded to see the documentation, any proof of this supposed last-minute change. My parents fumbled with excuses before my father finally admitted they'd just transferred my portion to Lily because she needed it more. "You have a good job, Grace. You don't need an inheritance. Your sister is trying to build something, and family money should go where it's most needed." Michael informed them this was criminal fraud and embezzlement, that we would be filing charges immediately. That's when things got ugly. My mother ran to their bedroom and came back with papers, shoving them in the fireplace before we could stop her. My father tried to block Michael from getting to them while Lily screamed that I was trying to ruin her life out of jealousy. Michael managed to pull some partially burned pages from the fireplace, clearly showing the original while leaving everything equally to both of us. The police arrived after Michael called them, but my parents immediately played the victim, claiming this was just a family dispute and I was being vindictive because they'd given Lily her inheritance early. The officers took statements but said it would be hard to prove criminal intent since my parents were the legal executors. They suggested we handle it in civil court, which meant more legal fees I couldn't afford because of the credit card fraud. As we were leaving, I heard my mother on the phone with relatives, sobbing about how I was trying to destroy the family over money, how I'd called the police on them like they were common criminals. By that night, my phone was blowing up with messages from family members calling me greedy, selfish, saying grandmother would be ashamed of me for putting money over family. Only Derek's recordings and cousin Emma's support kept me sane. Derek had been at the house when my parents were discussing the inheritance, and he'd caught them laughing about how easy it was to manipulate me. "Grace is too soft," my mother had said. "She'll make a fuss, but she'll never actually do anything. She needs our approval too much." He sent me everything, apologizing for ever being part of their world. He also told me something that broke my heart. Lily had been bragging to him about using grandmother's money for her trip, calling it inheritance vacation and joking that at least grandma was finally useful for something. My company's legal team stepped in when they heard about the situation, offering pro bono help because they were horrified that anyone would treat their VP this way. Victoria also connected me with forensic accountants who could trace the money. But the emotional damage was done. Not only had they stolen my money, they'd stolen my grandmother's final gift and made me look like the villain for wanting justice. They'd taken the last piece of unconditional love I'd had from biological family and turned it into another weapon against me. 1 month before the gala, I made the hardest decision of my life: complete no contact with my biological family. After the inheritance theft, the credit fraud, and years of emotional and financial abuse, I finally accepted what everyone around me had been trying to tell me. These people didn't love me. They never had. I was just a resource to be exploited, a bank account to fund Lily's fantasies, a scapegoat to blame for everything wrong in their lives. My therapist called it liberation. I called it heartbreak. The extinction burst started immediately. When I blocked their phone numbers, they started showing up at my workplace. First, it was my mother, dressed in her best victim outfit, sobbing in the lobby about how her daughter had abandoned her. Security had to escort her out when she started screaming that I was an ungrateful child who owed them everything. Then came my father, attempting to storm into a board meeting to talk sense into me, only to be physically removed by building security when he started threatening to ruin my career. But the worst was Lily, who somehow charmed her way past reception and cornered me in the elevator. "You think you're so much better than us," she hissed, blocking the elevator doors from closing. "But you're nothing without family. You're just a pathetic workaholic who nobody actually likes. At least I know who I am. You're just a fake corporate robot pretending to be happy." When security finally pulled her away, she was screaming that I'd regret this, that she'd destroy my reputation and make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. The irony of her calling me fake while she lived entirely off stolen money wasn't lost on me. My boss Victoria witnessed the entire elevator incident and immediately called a meeting with HR and security. "Grace, this is beyond family drama. This is workplace harassment and stalking. We need to take serious measures to protect you and our other employees." They implemented new security protocols, distributed photos of my family to all security personnel, and offered me the option to work from home if I felt unsafe. The support from my company was overwhelming, but it also made me realize how abnormal my family's situation was. Normal families didn't require security protocols. That's when Lily escalated to social media terrorism. She started a blog called The Truth About Grace, where she posted fabricated stories about my supposed cruelty, claiming I'd stolen from her, that I'd turned grandmother against her, that I was mentally unstable and had attacked her at family gatherings. She posted edited photos and out-of-context text messages, trying to paint herself as the victim of her mean, money-obsessed older sister. Some of her posts gained traction in certain toxic family support groups where she presented herself as the scapegoat child fighting back against the golden child, a complete reversal of reality. The damage to my professional reputation was real. Some clients Googled me and found Lily's blog, leading to awkward conversations with Victoria about the situation. One potential partner even canceled a meeting, citing concerns about personal drama affecting professional relationships. That's when my company's legal team stepped in again, sending cease and desist letters and working to get the defamatory content removed. But Lily just moved to new platforms, always staying just within legal bounds while spreading her poison. Everything changed when the company announced our annual gala at the Waldorf Astoria. As senior VP, I was put in charge of the guest list and security arrangements for our biggest event of the year. We were expecting Fortune 500 CEOs, major investors, and media coverage. It was the kind of event my parents had always dreamed of attending, where they could network and brag about their successful daughter while trying to find marks for Lily's latest scheme. I knew with absolute certainty they would try to crash it. My prediction proved right when Lily posted on Instagram about her excitement for the family company event she'd be attending, complete with photos of a designer gown she'd bought with my grandmother's money. Comments poured in from her followers asking how they could get invited to such exclusive events, and she replied that it was all about family connections, that her sister was finally including her in the important parts of her life. She was already spinning a narrative where she'd graciously forgiven me and we'd reconciled, setting up her grand entrance to an event she wasn't invited to. Working with our security team, I developed a plan. I created fake VIP passes that looked identical to the real ones but were programmed to flag as security risks when scanned. I had them delivered to my parents' house through a courier service, along with a formal-looking invitation that mentioned a special family reception before the main event. The passes had their names printed in gold lettering, making them feel exclusive and important. I knew their egos wouldn't let them question why I'd suddenly included them after months of no contact. Nathan thought I was being too elaborate, but Victoria understood immediately. "You're not just protecting the event," she said during one of our planning meetings. "You're giving them exactly what they want, only to show them what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. It's poetic justice." She was right. After years of being excluded from family celebrations, of being made to feel less than, of watching from the sidelines while Lily got everything handed to her, I was finally in a position to show them how it felt. The week before the gala, I had security briefed on the situation. Photos of my parents and Lily were distributed with clear instructions. These individuals would likely attempt entry with sophisticated fake passes and would claim to be family of Grace Chen, the senior VP. Under no circumstances were they to be admitted. If they caused a disturbance, police should be called immediately. The security team, having dealt with my family's harassment before, took the threat seriously and developed contingency plans for various scenarios. Derek reached out one last time to warn me that Lily was planning something big for the gala. She'd been bragging to her followers about the connections she'd make, the investors she'd charm for her fashion line, how this would be the launch of her real career. She'd even hired a photographer to capture her networking at the event, planning to use the photos for her business website. The delusion was complete. She genuinely believed she'd walk into my company's gala and leave with million-dollar investments. My found family rallied around me as the date approached. Nathan's parents insisted on attending as my personal guests, wanting to show support and provide a buffer if needed. Emma flew in from Seattle, ready to document everything in case we needed evidence later. My therapy group sent messages of encouragement, reminding me that protecting myself wasn't cruel, it was necessary. My work team made sure I knew they had my back, with several volunteering to run interference if my family somehow made it inside. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety or fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards. My family had spent years making me feel worthless, stealing from me, humiliating me, all while expecting me to continue funding their lives and accepting their abuse. Tomorrow, they would learn that their actions had consequences. They would stand outside in their fancy clothes, holding their fake passes, and finally understand what it felt like to be deemed not good enough. The student had become the master, and class was about to be in session. The night of the gala arrived with perfect dramatic timing, as if the universe itself wanted to ensure maximum impact. The weather forecast had predicted light showers, but by 6 p.m., the skies opened up with torrential rain that would have made Noah nervous. I stood in the Waldorf's magnificent lobby, greeting legitimate guests as they arrived, shaking hands with CEOs and investors while keeping one eye on the security monitors. Nathan stood beside me in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, occasionally squeezing my hand in silent support. At exactly 7:15, fashionably late as always, my family's Uber pulled up to the entrance. Through the security feed, I watched them emerge. My father in a rented tuxedo that pulled too tight across his belly, my mother in a sequined gown that screamed mother of the bride at a Vegas wedding, and Lily in a white designer dress that cost more than most people's cars, purchased with my grandmother's stolen money. They huddled under the valet umbrella, preening and checking their appearances, completely oblivious to the rain that was about to ruin their night. They strutted to the entrance with the confidence of people who'd never faced real consequences, my father leading the way with his chest puffed out like he owned the place. Lily was already posing for her hired photographer, who was capturing what she thought would be her grand entrance into high society. They presented their fake VIP passes to the doorman with smug smiles, probably already mentally calculating how much they could extract from the wealthy guests inside. The scanner beeped red instead of green, and I watched their expressions change from smugness to confusion. "I'm sorry, but these passes are invalid," the head of security informed them, maintaining perfect professionalism despite knowing exactly who they were. "You'll need to step aside." My father immediately went into aggressive mode, demanding to speak to a manager, insisting there must be some mistake. My mother played the confused victim, fluttering her hands and insisting they were VIP guests, that their daughter Grace Chen was the senior VP running this event. Lily just stood there for a moment, processing that her grand entrance was being denied. That's when the rain really started coming down. The valet umbrella was needed for actual guests, leaving my family exposed to the elements. Within minutes, my mother's elaborate updo began to collapse, her hairspray no match for the downpour. Lily's photographer tried to shield his equipment, eventually giving up and running for cover, abandoning his client. My father's rented tuxedo began to smell like wet wool, and Lily's white designer dress turned transparent, revealing the gaudy lingerie she'd probably planned to seduce investors with. They refused to move from the entrance, blocking legitimate guests, so security had to physically relocate them to the side. That's when Lily spotted me through the glass doors. The look of rage on her face when she realized I was inside, champagne flute in hand, chatting with the kind of successful people she desperately wanted to impress, was pure art. She started pounding on the glass, screaming my name, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Grace! Tell them who we are. This is all a mistake. Grace!" My mother joined in the theatrical display, pressing her palms against the glass like a scene from a tragedy, wailing about her cruel daughter who'd abandoned her family. My father tried a different approach, attempting to push past security while shouting about lawsuits and discrimination. The legitimate guests arriving began giving them wide berths, whispering to each other about the crazy people causing a scene. One CEO I'd been courting for months asked security if they needed police assistance, clearly concerned about safety. That's when Lily made her biggest mistake. Desperate and humiliated, she grabbed the doorman's arm and tried to force her way inside. Security immediately restrained her, and she responded by screaming that this was assault, that she'd sue everyone, that her sister was a psychotic bitch who'd stolen everything from her. The irony of her accusing me of theft while wearing my grandmother's money wasn't lost on anyone watching. My father tried to intervene and ended up slipping on the wet pavement, landing hard on his rented tuxedo, splitting the pants in the process. Victoria chose that moment to appear at my side, elegant in her navy gown, surveying the scene outside with the detached interest of a lawyer watching evidence accumulate. "Are those the people who assaulted you and stole your inheritance?" she asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The ones who committed credit card fraud and tried to extort money from the company?" The whispers around us intensified as people realized the disheveled individuals outside weren't random crashers but my actual family. Security finally had enough when my mother tried to bribe them, pulling out a wad of cash that was probably the last of what they'd stolen from me. The head of security calmly informed them that they were trespassing on private property and had 1 minute to leave before police were called. My mother let out a wail that could probably be heard in New Jersey, claiming I was killing her with my cruelty. Lily was now ugly crying, her designer dress ruined, hair plastered to her head, looking nothing like the fashion entrepreneur she pretended to be. They made one last desperate attempt, my father calling my phone repeatedly from outside, the rain distorting his face as he pressed against the glass. I watched it ring, Nathan's arm around my waist, feeling nothing but calm satisfaction. When security showed them the compilation video of their harassment at my workplace, their threats against me, and their previous attempts to infiltrate company property, even my father's bluster failed. The police arrived just as my mother collapsed dramatically on the wet sidewalk, claiming heart problems that everyone knew were fake. The officers recognized them from previous incidents and had no patience for their theatrics. As they were escorted to the police car for trespassing, I heard Lily shriek one last thing, "You'll regret this, Grace. I'll destroy you. Everyone will know what you really are." The irony was that everyone already knew what I was. A successful woman who'd finally stopped letting toxic people masquerade as family. As the police car pulled away, I raised my champagne glass in a silent toast to freedom. Inside, the gala continued flawlessly. Word had spread among the guests about what happened, but instead of judgment, I received nothing but support. One investor pulled me aside to share his own story of cutting off toxic family members who'd tried to exploit his success. Another CEO offered her lawyer services pro bono for my ongoing cases against them. By the end of the night, I'd not only succeeded professionally but had found a community of people who understood that sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. 3 months after the gala, I sat in a courtroom watching justice finally being served. The judge read out the verdict. My parents were ordered to pay full restitution for the credit card fraud, plus damages. The inheritance case had also been settled in my favor, with forensic accountants tracing exactly where every penny had gone. Lily's Swiss vacation, her designer wardrobe, her failed business ventures, all purchased with money stolen from my grandmother's legacy. They were given 6 months to pay back everything or face criminal charges. The courtroom was nearly empty except for my support system. Nathan held my hand as the judge detailed how my parents had systematically exploited their position of trust. Victoria and Nathan's father sat behind us, having become the parental figures I'd always deserved. Emma was there too, having documented everything from the beginning, her recordings instrumental in proving the pattern of abuse. Even Derek showed up to testify, his evidence crucial in establishing their criminal intent. My biological family sat across the aisle, looking smaller and older than I remembered, their false superiority stripped away by legal reality. When Lily took the stand, she tried one last manipulation, crying about how I'd ruined her dreams and destroyed the family. But when presented with receipts showing she'd spent over $300,000 of stolen money in just 2 years, her victim act crumbled. The judge particularly noted her social media posts bragging about her inheritance vacation while my grandmother's body was barely cold. My mother's tears dried up quickly when she realized they weren't working, and my father's attempts to intimidate everyone with angry stares just made him look pathetic. The exposure of their crimes had destroyed their carefully cultivated image in their community. Word spread quickly about what they'd done, and their social circle abandoned them like rats fleeing a sinking ship. My father lost his job when his employer learned about the fraud conviction. My mother was asked to resign from all her charity boards. Lily's Instagram influencer dreams died when her followers realized her entire lifestyle was funded by theft. She went from flaunting designer goods to working minimum wage at a mall kiosk, her fashion empire reduced to selling phone cases. They moved from their suburban house to a small apartment, the proceeds going toward restitution. The last I heard from mutual acquaintances, they spent their time blaming each other for their downfall. My father blamed my mother for spoiling Lily. My mother blamed my father for the fraud idea. Lily blamed both of them for not stealing enough to set her up for life. The family that had once united in exploiting me was now destroying itself from within, their true nature finally turned on each other instead of me. 6 weeks after the trial, Nathan and I got married in a beautiful ceremony at his family's estate, the same place where Lily had assaulted me. We reclaimed that space with love and joy, filling it with people who actually cared about us. Victoria walked me down the aisle, having officially become the mother figure I'd always needed. Nathan's father gave a toast about chosen family that had everyone in tears. Emma was my maid of honor, joking in her speech about how she was glad she'd started recording family dinners, though she never expected them to become court evidence. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of and more because it was filled with genuine love, not the performative displays my biological family had specialized in. My coworkers attended, celebrating not just my marriage but my freedom. The CEO who'd witnessed the gala incident sent a massive flower arrangement with a card reading "To New Beginnings and the Family We Choose." Even Derek sent a gift with a note apologizing again for his connection to Lily and wishing us happiness. The absence of my biological family wasn't a loss, it was the greatest gift I could have given myself. Shortly after the honeymoon, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy was immediately followed by determination that my child would never experience what I had. Nathan and I started therapy together to ensure we'd break the cycle of abuse completely. We talked about boundaries, healthy relationships, and how to raise a child who knew their worth wasn't tied to what they could provide others. Victoria and Nathan's father were overjoyed to become grandparents, promising to spoil our child with love, not manipulation. I also started a support group for other professionals dealing with financial abuse from family members. The response was overwhelming, with dozens of successful people sharing stories of siblings, parents, and extended family who felt entitled to their achievements. We created resources for identifying financial manipulation, setting boundaries, and pursuing legal remedies. What had felt like my unique shame turned out to be depressingly common, but together we found strength in shared experience and mutual support. A year later, my parents sent a letter through their lawyer asking for forgiveness and a chance to meet their grandchild. The letter was full of the same manipulations, the same refusal to take real responsibility, the same subtle threats dressed up as appeals to family loyalty. They claimed they'd changed, that losing everything had taught them the value of family, but the postscript asking if I could help them get back on their feet financially revealed their true intentions. My response was a cease and desist order, making it clear that any attempt at contact would result in immediate legal action. Lily tried one last time to resurrect her influence career by pivoting to family trauma content, attempting to monetize our estrangement. But without money for designer goods or exotic trips, her content fell flat. The last post I saw before blocking her completely was a bitter rant about how successful people have an obligation to support their families, how choosing money over blood was the ultimate selfishness. The comments were brutal, pointing out that she'd clearly never worked for anything in her life. Reality without a financial safety net had finally caught up with her. As I write this, holding my 6-month-old daughter while she sleeps, I feel nothing but peace. The anger is gone, replaced by gratitude for the life I built. My daughter will grow up surrounded by people who love her for who she is, not what she can provide. She'll know that family isn't about blood or obligation but about mutual respect and genuine care. She'll never question her worth or feel like she has to buy love with success. The cycle of abuse ends with me, and that's the greatest gift I can give her. Sometimes the only way to heal from toxic family is complete removal, like cutting out cancer before it spreads. It's not cruel or selfish to protect yourself from people who see you as nothing more than a resource to exploit. Real family doesn't laugh when you're bleeding. Real family doesn't steal your future to fund someone else's fantasies. Real family doesn't require you to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Real family celebrates your success instead of trying to claim it as their own. To anyone watching this who's dealing with similar situations, know that you deserve better. Your success doesn't obligate you to fund someone else's failures. Your achievements aren't communal property for family to divide up. You're not selfish for expecting basic respect and honesty from people who claim to love you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation, but simply refusing to be destroyed by people who never deserved you in the first place. Build your own family from people who match your energy, respect your boundaries, and love you without conditions. Looking back at that night at the Waldorf, watching my family stand in the rain while I celebrated inside, I don't feel guilty. I feel free. They made their choices every time they stole from me, every time they laughed at my pain, every time they chose Lily's wants over my needs. I simply showed them what those choices cost. The price of abuse isn't just money or relationships, it's relevance. They made themselves irrelevant to my life through their actions, and I simply made it official. The best revenge truly is a life well lived, surrounded by people who actually deserve to share in your success. What would you do if your family saw you as nothing but a bank account? Have you ever had to cut off toxic relatives who felt entitled to your success? Drop a comment below sharing your story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about breaking free from toxic relationships and building the life you deserve. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose yourself over family that chooses to hurt you. Thank you for watching, and remember, the family you choose is always more important than the family you're given by chance.